Yesterday, I gave my mock draft 1.0. Today, it is Leif Thulin's turn to share his mock draft 1.0. We know who's going number one. We know who's going number two. To find out who's going number three, stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. And this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That is prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. I am your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board and the founder of NBA Draft Junkies. And my co-host for today is Leif Thulin. I am exhausted. It is 11:40 p.m. Central Time. And it's a little bit earlier because Leif is in Mountain Time. It's weird. Two of our Locked On NBA Big Board hosts are in Mountain Time. Probably the only two people other than David Locke that I know that are in Mountain Time. Leif, what is going on and how's everything shaking in your neck of the woods?
All is well for me. A relatively off day of work, so I got to play some basketball and I've been able to watch some film as well. So I'm having a good day and all's well in here in Utah.
All right. So I was actually at the St. Mary's Houston game this past weekend, and I was able to talk to a Jazz high-level executive about the draft. And he's just as, I don't want to say he's confused, but our conversation on Saturday was totally different regarding the draft than it was in October when I saw him in Las Vegas, because obviously the Jazz were expected to be in the sweepstakes or the Wembanyama watch. And his comment to me was, are Jazz fans really driving up your listens? I said, I don't think so right now. I think they're kind of focused on the playoffs. And so you're in Utah. What is the temperature there? Are fans still like all in on the Wembanyama watch, or is it like, let's shoot for the playoffs? Like, what's, in your opinion, what is the mindset right now?
I think you have a mix of both. I think the atmosphere is fun because they're overachieving as a team, especially at the start of the year. And for multiple points during that first kind of stint of the season, the Jazz were at number one. Now they're kind of in a play-in game if it were to start today. And I think there's some people that say, well, we know we're not true contenders, so let's tank and get Wembanyama. And then there's always going to be in between, but there's certainly people, especially on Twitter, that are kind of cynical of the success the Jazz are having and saying, well, we must tank because there's no experience you can gain. And I find myself somewhere in the middle. I think this draft has enough talent that if you're with 3 picks, you should be able to get some high-level contributors to your team by trying your best. And with the roster they have, there could be trades and you could become worse towards the trade deadline. And you still have a lottery pick and then, two other picks to take a crack at some swings. So I'd say the temperature is optimistic, and there's people that really admire the job Will Hardy's done. I'm one of those people. I think he's done a phenomenal job, and I really believe in culture and chemistry. So I think it's a good thing that the Jazz are competing early and are ahead of schedule. And obviously Wembanyama can transcend a franchise, but there's plenty of players in this draft, should they draft, 10 through 12, that I think should the organization develop them properly and the Jazz get the right guy, could really have a similar impact, even if it's not to the magnitude that Wembanyama will, because he's, and quite frankly, he's the best prospect since LeBron James, and LeBron James has got every argument to be one of the, I won't be controversial, but I'll just say one of the best 2-3 players ever. So, this is a good draft to make a chance, and Wembanyama would be lovely to get. Maybe the lottery odds will fall in our favor, but if not, I'm still optimistic.
Best draft prospect. So you have him over Luka. Like, what does he have to do to live up to the hype?
Coming into it, I mean, Luka wasn't regarded as the top prospect by the majority of draft experts that year. Whereas Wembanyama is being seen as, last year he would have gone number one over Banchero, who's been phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then you could even make the argument 2 years ago that was the case. So I mean, I love Luka. He's my favorite player to watch in the entire NBA, but I don't think it's fair to say that he was a better prospect coming in based off the way that the majority of people looked at him.
Yeah, I think if Luka was on the NBA app and he had like a showcase game prior to the season, I think he probably would have had a similar buzz. I mean, he won the EuroLeague, like which is it's crazy in a sense, and it's a step up compared to what Victor is doing. I think that there was a point where Luka kind of wore down a little bit because he literally, and I was living in Europe at that time, he didn't have an off season. Like he went straight from Real Madrid, went to the Final Four. Then he probably had a few weeks off. Then they had Eurobasket that summer. That's when he like turned the corner, made this big jump. And then from Eurobasket, they went straight into the season. And then they went all the way to the Final Four. So there was a period, maybe like in April, he probably wore down a little bit because he played straight. I mean, literally straight through. And so I thought that he was head and shoulders the best prospect in that draft. But I saw him. I was there. And so, but yeah, anyway. All right. So let's just get into your draft. All right. So for the remainder of this segment, I want you to talk about the guys that missed out on the lottery. Is there one guy that did not make your lottery that is probably in the lottery on consensus draft boards?
Well, yeah. So I kind of use Tankathon as my amalgamation of draft boards, and so I'll say a couple guys that I have in the lottery that I aren't there. I mean, GG Jackson, I'm higher on than the majority. So and that's out of the lottery, that's in it. Then there's going to be a few that are in the lottery here that I don't have in my lottery. One would be Dylan Mitchell. I've got just outside of the lottery. I think he's got high upside, and there's some players that there's going to be some teams that really are enamored by his size. I've heard he's going to measure closer to 6'9" than what he's listed at 6'7", and that may rise. But I think he's a beneficiary of playing a really good team right now that fits his athletic attributes. So he'd be one of the main ones. I think some people may have Kyle Filipowski cracking the tail end, or Derek Lively, and neither of those two are in my lottery either.
Yeah, I don't have Lively and Filipowski in my lottery. I have Dylan Mitchell in my lottery. I have him going to Orlando at number 11. I use 538 projections, and man, would it be, I guess, very difficult for him to crack Orlando's rotation if the roster is what it is today. We're talking about a team that has Banchero, Wagner, Bol, and then Jonathan Isaac hasn't played yet. So yeah, that front line. I mean, Orlando's roster seems like it has 19 guys on it. It just seems like they have a bunch of guys. And I had a conversation with a parent today of an NBA player. He was talking about this particular class. And I was like, I don't really know too many guys in a fair, straight up open competition in this class that could crack Orlando's rotation or even Houston's rotation. Do you agree?
You make the point of fair, which I think is a really good point. Especially, we talked about this with Houston. Jabari Smith was picked 3rd. Tari Eason was picked 17th, and Jabari and Tari are both productive. But I think that you're going to, no matter what, even if Tari had been better, Jabari would get more playing time because of the politics of it. I use this as an example because it's something we spoke of earlier on. But if you kind of bring this up, I mean, there's the top guys, Wembanyama, Scoot, and I'd say Amen Thompson, that I think no matter what team they're on, they're going to crack the rotation for. But even a guy like Cam Whitmore or Brandon Miller, I think, struggles to crack the rotation for those teams immediately. So I'm with you there. I think that those teams are redundantly built, talented but redundant, and I think there's going to be personnel choices, almost in the way that Cleveland had 2 on-ball guards and Darius Garland and Colin Sexton, and they they correctly chose to kind of build around Garland. And I think you're going to see more and more of these teams kind of picking best available and then choosing the best available down the road.
Yeah, you can look at the Thunder. Who can come in and just crack their rotation right away if everybody's healthy? Just the guys at the very top of the drafts. All right, let's get right into, actually, you know, let's take a break, and then when we come back, we will go through your lottery. I want to tell the audience about Prize Picks, and I'm sure the audience knows, but if you are new, you're a first-time listener, Prize Picks is it's daily fantasy made easy. You pick 2 to 6 players, and you will decide if they will score more or less than their Prize Pick projection. You can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It is just you versus their projections available. Prize Pick offers projections on any sport that you watch. So it's NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer. They even have esports. And the entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals, and it is currently operational in 30 states and Canada. So download the Prize Pick app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. If you are a first-time user, you can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. So do not forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right, once again, thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, which is available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, I'm Rafael Barlowe, my co-host Leif Thulin. All right, let's just get right into your lottery. At number 14, who was the last guy to barely make the cut in your lottery?
So I did it team by team. So I have my last 2 ranked were G.G. Jackson and Kel'el Ware. So I guess it would have depended who was picking there, depending on what the lottery odds gave out. So the way I did it had the Jazz picking 14th.
Okay.
Which was, fun for me. And I have G.G. Jackson at number 14. And I think there's a case he could go higher. I just think that a lot of the teams ahead kind of don't are more built to try to win sooner due to where the situations they were at. And I think G.G. Jackson being the youngest player in the draft would be a nice addition to the Jazz. And also he's a player that I'm higher on than the consensus, I believe, because he's one of 2 freshmen in the country scoring 17 points a game. And I mentioned he's the youngest. He's on a horrible South Carolina team tasked with carrying a kind of inconceivable load that I think once he's in SEC play will diminish. And I think there's going to be people on Twitter that say, oh my Lord, he's inefficient. But to me, that means he's tasked with doing things that others could not carry that burden. I think in the long term, it'll be good for him. So I think that would be a very good pick for my Utah Jazz. But secondly, I also think that at the tail end of the lottery, he's got more upside than the most players that you could take there.
Yeah, I had him going number 16 to the Jazz. And again, my order was based off of 538 projections, which is based off of 538. Jazz will have the 12th pick, 16th pick, and 23rd. So I did have him going to Utah, so we have that in common. He's somebody that could easily end up in my lottery. I mean, he could easily be in the lottery, but just the way the cookie crumbled when I did my mock, he fell just outside of it. Kel'el Ware, what are your thoughts on Ware, and then where do you have him going?
Yeah, so I'll start with the thoughts. Kel'el Ware is kind of what I imagined he'd be. He's a little raw, but there's talent that seeps through, and it's intriguing. You see the shooting touch, the high release, the defensive instincts. One of the best things that happened to Kel'el Ware was N'Faly Dante getting hurt. And that's never something you wish for. But I think in his case, he's been able to kind of play in that matchup zone. Oregon's been playing in the middle, and he's been able to take the natural position as a rim protector rather than someone who's kind of sliding on guards on the perimeter and kind of he looks like a baby horse at a colt at times because he's so long, and all of a sudden a guy like Marcus Sasser of Houston's driving at his hip, and he kind of just like tumbles away. And then when you see then there's a one play where Jamal Shed goes to the rim, a very aggressive, powerfully built guard goes to the rim, and he just goes straight up and stonewalls him. And so I think the moral of the story here is that he's raw, he's talented, and he's with play time and the physicality that he's experiencing as the center, as the marked man without N'Faly Dante, it's improved his stock in my eyes. And so in my mock, I've got him going 13th to the Knicks. I think that's a good fit for him. I'm not usually the biggest fit person. I'm usually best player available, and I think he's close to that. But in terms of fit, this is a good one because I think Mitchell Robinson isn't the long-term answer there, and he could fit around some of the pieces they have already established in New York.
Yeah, especially if he ends up being the rare pick and pop, pick and roll, like your vertical lob threat, your rim runner. Crazy coincidence, I have him going 10th on my board, and on my mock, the 10th pick goes to the Knicks. So we're like 2 for 2. Just different numbers, but the teams are both the same. All right, number 12. Who do you have going number 12?
So I've got the Jazz at 12 on mine, and it gets really interesting because it really depends who goes above, because there's a couple that I think you could spin a couple different ways. I have the Jazz taking Anthony Black here, and I was tempted to take Anthony Black with the 11th pick to the Thunder, but I ended up taking Jarace Walker there. So I'll explain the Anthony Black to the Jazz at 12. I'd be really thrilled with as a Jazz fan. Jumbo facilitator. I actually was lower on him entering this season, and I've been really impressed. He's one of the prospects who's improved his stock the most in my eyes, is his performance at Maui and just the relentless pressure he was able to put on the rim and use his traits of size. And he was a better athlete in the half court than I anticipated. And I like that pick because he's not going to be forced into being the primary facilitator, but he could use those traits and be a facilitator on a team that will have an egalitarian attack. So it's a good fit for him, and I like the pick for the Jazz there. And I think there's a chance that he's higher on my board than where he is right now. His stock is trending upward, and I like what I see from Arkansas as a whole. I wonder how he'll adjust to Nick Smith once Nick Smith is fully acclimated.
We didn't plan this out, but our 3 picks are the same. I had Anthony Black going 12 to the Jazz with the Wolves pick. And my commentary was, it's just a perfect situation for him. It gives Utah a big facilitator, and he can develop and learn under Mike Conley for a year or 2. And Utah just doesn't really have a lot of size in the backcourt as far as like their point guards. And so, yeah, I thought that was a great fit for Anthony Black. Sometimes, when you're doing these mock drafts, fit isn't the best, but you don't really, some people really don't consider fit at all. All right. So who do you have at 11?
Jarace Walker to the Thunder for me. I was deciding between he and Anthony Black, and I thought that the plug and play ability, you saw what Jalen Williams was able to do in the summer league and be a cutter and be someone who can be a secondary or tertiary facilitator. Now they're different, but I think the energy and plug and play ability of Jarace Walker and Jalen Williams are similar. And his physicality and switchability is something that I think that Mark Daniel could use. And I actually think the Thunder will be very good defensively down the road. They've got their backcourt set in stone. And this is one of the rare instances I'm truly enamored by the fit, maybe. And I think he's kind of there on my board anyway, the 9 through 11 range, 9 through 12 range. And then you add in Chet Holmgren as a piece. I think these guys are all a nice mesh. And I think Jarace Walker is a guy that you can confidently say no matter where he goes, he'll be productive because of the way he can be inserted for energy and you don't have to draw up plays for your lottery rookie. He'll just make the plays himself. He and Tari Eason are similar that way. And Tari was a guy I was very high on in the last draft cycle.
Yeah, I saw him play this week. He's kind of in a slump right now. He's only scored 12 points in their last 3 games. He just kind of has some troubles with St. Mary's. Looked like he was trying to do a little bit too much off the dribble. And yeah, just he's in a slump right now. But he's on a team that is the number one ranked team in the country. So his role is more so, I think, similar to what his role would be as a rookie in the NBA, where he'd be like an energy guy, and just kind of like a plug and play. Crazy talented. There's so much that I don't think he's really been able to showcase so far. If you watch his high school film, you see that he's just a really, really good passer. And even though he's shown some flashes of it, I don't think I've seen like the full arsenal of playmaking that he has. I actually have him going number 13 in my board, going to my Portland Trailblazers, who I hope are not in the lottery. All right, when we return, we will cover your top 10. Stay tuned. Our last segment, this is Rafael Barlowe with my co-host Leif Thulin. We left off with Jarris Walker going to the Thunder. And is that your 11th pick?
Yeah, that was my 11th pick.
All right, number 10. Who is number 10 on the Leif Thulin mock draft 1.0?
So I have the Knicks here, and I have them taking Keontae George, although so I had on my mock Anthony Black / Keontae George. So I had Anthony Black slide down, and now revisiting, I'm kind of second guessing myself, but I'll stick with my Keontae George one. It just may mess me up in the future one, but Keontae George to the Knicks is something I could see happening because Jalen Brunson's there, RJ Barrett's there. Could he be a sixth man? And this is talking about fit, but Keontae George will make plays that make your mouth drop. I watched him play Gonzaga the other day, which is hard to find. It was on Peacock, but long story short, he made this one move where he kind of spun, put the ball between his legs toward the defense, contorted his body, and hit a three when plastered, like perfect defense. And you kind of made yourself think like, wow, like I go to almost every Jazz game, and I was like, Jordan Clarkson makes that type of shot. If Keontae George has a higher potential than Jordan Clarkson, and Jordan Clarkson's averaging about 19 a game right now, I think it's hard to argue that he's not worthy of one of these top 10 picks. I've compared him to Jamal Murray before. And I think though the Knicks aren't a perfect situation for him coming in, it takes a little bit of pressure away having a guy like Jalen Brunson who will handle the ball. And I think should he be there, that would be an intriguing pick. I also could see the Wizards kind of having him protege under Bradley Beal at 8. So I had kind of a slash there as well.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the Knicks situation for him. I think it's maybe not the perfect fit, like you said, but if he is like begin his career as like their sixth man, or as like maybe even like the role that Mathurin is playing right now for Indiana, I think that's a good fit for him. I think that he's answered some of the concerns, even though he's not really shooting the ball well. I think he's shooting under 40% from the field, but I think he's answered some of the concerns and questions that people had about him coming into the season. He had a reputation as being like a high volume scorer, a guy that needed a lot of shots to be effective. And I think he's fit in well with Baylor's guards, who, I mean, they returning their two top leading scorers. He's averaging 4 assists per game. So I think that he has shown that he is a capable playmaker. And then another concern that people had about him was his just defensive effort. And I would say that coming in, he was a great defender in high school. I think he just has like a cool, laid back personality, and sometimes, or just kind of a laid back demeanor on the court. And I think sometimes when you're laid back on the court, people can say you're lazy. But he's shown that he can be a good, solid defender. So I think that he's really helped himself, especially the last game against Gonzaga. But I think that he's still trying to figure things out and figure out his role. And once he gets going, I think his stock could end up putting him at the put him at least in the middle of the first round. I'm sorry, in the middle of the lottery. All right, number 9. Who's number 9 on your board?
Yeah, so I'll preface 9 with saying that 8 through 10, I think all of them are kind of competing for a couple players, and at the guard slots, I think the Wizards, the Heat, and the Knicks are my 8 through 10. Wizards 8, Heat 9, Knicks 10. So I had Keontae going 10. I could very easily see the Wizards going 8, and on the way I mocked it, I kind of had a slash there. So I'll preface this with that I'm going to give the hypothetical of 2 here. The Heat, I think the perfect player for them is Casey Wallace. So that said, I thought Casey Wallace to the Wizards would have been the best pick too. So
that's where I have him going. I have him going to the Wizards.
Yeah. So I'll combine, if that's all right, the Wizards and the Heat, and I'll give the rationale for both. Just because I wanted to talk about Casey and the Heat. Like, if there's a Heat culture guy in the draft, I think the pick that, like, if I asked you that question, I think there's 2 answers, and it would have been Casey Wallace and Jarace Walker, or like Heat culture dudes.
Yeah.
And so if he's there, and if the Heat are there, which I doubt they will be, that made too much sense for me not to take it 9. That said, with the Wizards, I also had Casey Wallace or Anthony Black being the 2 that I would have taken, and also Keontae George would have been a consideration. Casey would have been my favorite for the Wizards as well, which is where I ended up taking him, just because I'm a believer that at that spot, you're asking too much for one of them to be like a protege for Bradley Beal. I think they reached for Johnny Davis. We discussed this many times. I wasn't high on Johnny Davis, and I think that was a tough spot. And I thought that why not take a player that you don't ask to be the star here and have him be a co-star. So that's why I liked Casey Wallace here. And then obviously the Heat culture one made too much sense. Anthony Black and Keontae George were my other considerations. And then one more guard that's kind of in that same mold that right now is not doing so well, but I could see kind of fitting roles for those 3 teams would be Dariq Whitehead, should he return to kind of what he was coming out of Montverde. I think the foot injury is being swept under the rug, saying he looks slow and heavy footed. I think you'll see flashes of him being a better athlete than he was. I don't think he's the dominant one, and he's a good shooter. He's a good shot creator because he's smart. He's intelligent. He doesn't force shots, and he's able to create for others with his intellect and his ability to put pressure on the defense. So I'll give kind of a wishy-washy answer there, because there's, that's the way the draft goes. If one player is picked somewhere, the other team's going to have to adapt. And I couldn't stay away from talking about Casey Wallace as a potential player for the Heat, the way that Tankathon lottery gave me.
Yeah, and 538 had Miami, I guess, turning the corner at some point in the season, and they had Miami picking at number 18. And so such a huge gap between where 538 sees them and then where Tankathon has it based off the standings today. But I had Casey Wallace going to the Wizards, and but Casey in Miami would be like, it would just be like their type of guy. And then you have to consider that Kentucky guys outperform their draft position almost every year, and so I'm sure Miami would be thrilled if they had the same results from Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo, if they got similar draft value out of Casey Wallace. All right, number 8.
So that was where I had the Wizards. So I kind of did 2 picks there. And so I had Casey Wallace going to the Wizards, and then like Dariq going 9 should he fall. That was where I kind of got messed up, because I wanted to talk about Casey as a fit on the Heat, but because I didn't think the Heat would be there, I didn't follow through. So that was my fault. 7, though, I have an interesting pick.
Okay.
Osar Thompson at 7, who I considered going as high as 5. I'm turning the corner on Osar. I really, really like him. I think he's got a higher potential than a few of the guys that are regarded as kind of more slam dunks than him. I think the Pelicans are a perfect place for Osar Thompson, because there's a lot of good players there. He can develop slowly or accelerate his pace, such as like Herb Jones did. He's got athleticism. His shot's starting to get better.
43% from 3 on 3.5 attempts.
Yeah.
If you would have told me that before the season, I would have told you you're crazy.
I toyed with putting him number 4 behind his twin brother Amen at 3, but I have him 7 here. And this was a bit of a fit pick. I think that the team above him on mine, the Magic, needed a guard and Nick Smith, but for 7, Osar Thompson of the Pelicans, I think that's a perfect kind of fit of culture and athleticism, and he fits the youth movement there. So I'm pretty excited. If I were the Pelicans to get 7 and get Osar Thompson, that would have me overjoyed.
I have him at number 6, and I think there's a strong possibility he could crack the top 5 if he continues to shoot the way he's shooting. All right, you briefly mentioned Nick Smith, so that means you have Nick at number 6.
Yes, I had Nick Smith at 6, and this is going out on a limb because obviously hasn't seen him. We haven't really seen him. So Osar on my big board is higher than Nick Smith, but I'm kind of projecting Nick Smith to accelerate his development and show his stuff. I think the Magic are redundant, as we mentioned. Jalen Suggs is getting better. Cole Anthony isn't a point guard to me. So I went with a guy that I think could be a true point guard if groomed correctly. And the Magic will be still redundant, but there's a chance that he becomes the guy at the point guard spot there and accelerates the timetable with a talented roster.
Yeah, and you see Markelle Fultz is back, and he looks good since he's returned. Had 20 points tonight. Somebody's gone. Like somebody that they either just drafted or just paid has to be out the door. And on the 538 mock, they had Orlando at number 2, and at number 2 that means they're selecting Scoot. And so I had in my article I wrote one of those guys is gonna have to scoot over and scoot out the roster because no matter what, it's gonna be redundant in Orlando. All right, so so you had Osar at number 7. Who do you have at number 6?
So 6 was Nick Smith.
Okay,
and then 5 is Brandon Miller to the Rockets for me.
That's a good fit. I like that fit for him.
That was a bit of a fit pick. Like I mentioned, I toyed with Osar at any spot from 4 through 7, and Brandon Miller that screamed, "Hey, what do they lack on the Rockets? Someone that can shoot well, create their own shot. Jabari can really shoot. I mentioned the reason I was a bit lower on him was I thought he could defend and be a pick and pop big, but he's not as talented at creating his own shot. Brandon Miller is a very good shot creator for his own self. And the guards there, I think they're gonna, choose which guard they're gonna build around down the road. Obviously, it's Jalen Green. Is Kevin Porter going to be part of it? I'm not certain of that. And I think you build a long, versatile lineup, especially with some of their depth pieces. Brandon Miller makes sense there to me, and I think he could find a way to be one of the top 2 scorers there, despite being one of the lower of those 3-4 highest picks they've had in the past few years.
Yeah, he's a guy that so many people were. I think you were just either hot or cold on him coming into the season. And no matter what, no matter how cold you are on him, you have to respect the fact that he's averaging like 19 and 9, shooting 46% from 3 on 7 attempts per game. And he's, in my opinion, he's been the most impressive freshman in this class. I actually have him going to San Antonio at number 4. And I think it'd be a little bit of redundancy there with him playing similar positions as Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell, but there's always room for a 6'9" shooter. And you can say the same for Houston. I think that he would give them another just floor spacer. And if Jabari hits, eventually becomes the floor spacer that they believe. And then with Brandon Miller on the wings, I mean, that's a lot of open driving lanes for Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. and also for Alperen Sengun in the post, who's a pretty good passer. All right, so I guess that means you have Cam Whitmore at number 4.
Yes, and this was a bit of a fit pick as well. Brandon Miller and Osar Thompson are right now ahead of Whitmore, but I haven't updated my board since Whitmore truly made his debut. So, him and Nick Smith are the wild cards for me. But the reason I like Cam Whitmore is because I saw what Miles Bridges was able to do with LaMelo Ball. And if you plug and play Cam Whitmore into Charlotte and envision a similar role for a player I think is more talented than Miles Bridges, even though Miles Bridges as a basketball player is a very good player.
He's a max guy. I mean, he's about to get a max contract.
Yeah, and I think Cam Whitmore is more talented and has similar explosion, and he's similarly built. So I basically just said, you know what, I'm going to restock Miles Bridges and hope that he's got a higher ceiling. So that was a bit of a fit pick, and I liked what I saw against Oklahoma for Villanova. There's when he drives left, he's going to shoot. When he drives right, he's driving. But you can work on that.
Yep. All right. So number 3. All right. Who's the third team on your Tankathon mock?
I got the Spurs, and I'm going best player available, Amen Thompson. There's a world where he could be better than Scoot Henderson. I'm not there yet, but I'm very high on Amen Thompson. And if you miss out on Wembanyama and Scoot, Amen Thompson is quite a consolation prize. That's nothing to scoff at, and I really like the possibility of him becoming the star to play with a guy like Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson. And Trey Jones is pretty good too, and they could play together because he's a taller player, but you'd give him the ball.
That's a good fit for him. A much better fit than what I have on my on the 538. They had the Pistons selecting third, and I think that's probably the absolute worst fit for Amen Thompson because he's playing the same position as their last two draft picks, and it's already a weird fit, even though it's really, really early. I mean, it's too early to really judge it, but it's somewhat of a weird fit with Jaden Ivey and Cade. And I think if you throw Thompson in there, he's not going to be their primary ball handler. And with his shooting, I think he's shooting like 15% from three right now. And he shot like 20 something last year. I think if you take him off the ball, you take away his greatest strength, which is, his playmaking and his athleticism and the advantages that he has there. So San Antonio would be a much, much better fit for him than Detroit. All right. So obviously we know who is going 1 and 2, and what teams are 1 and 2 in the Tankathon order.
Detroit getting Scoot at 2 and the Magic getting Wembanyama at 1. Neither fit I love, but you can't take fit when you got generational talents.
So what do you do if you're Detroit? You got the second pick.
I'm taking Scoot. You can't not take him. Trading out of that would be crazy. And unless Scoot were to go 1 in some world, then Wembanyama was a beautiful fit. But in the way it's boiling down, you just got to take Scoot. It's a weird fit, but you got to do it.
Yeah. All right. With the number 1 pick, obviously it is Victor Wembanyama, and you have them, or based off of Tankathon, Orlando has the number 1 pick. I want you to break down how you think Wembanyama would fit on this Orlando roster if it's constructed as is today.
I'll give you the pitch that is Bol is thriving. And there's people on Twitter who kind of play with this joke that's like, oh, no one's seen this before. And then there's this guy, and it's Bol. He's huge. He's got ball skills. He can shoot. Well, just imagine that and significantly better in Victor Wembanyama. So you replace Bol in the lineup and you bring in Victor Wembanyama, or you could have Wendell Carter. You could have him as an asset and trade him, and he's a really good player. He'd be quite a commodity, and you build for the future more so. And I actually like that idea, and I hadn't thought of it, but because Wembanyama can space the floor, he can be your rim protector. You have Paolo Banchero as your kind of top scorer of the future, Franz Wagner as a beautiful complementary piece. And that's the way I would like my lineup constructed. So I would probably have Bol come off the bench, and I'd trade Wendell Carter Jr. for an asset, and you could get quite an asset or a handful of draft picks to come in future years. And they'd really accelerate their timeline for competing by doing so. And obviously getting a generational prospect like Victor Wembanyama surely doesn't hurt. So that would be my pitch.
Yeah, they already run some very interesting lineups. If you add Wembanyama to that mix, I mean, 5-4 pick and rolls, 5-3, because Wembanyama can run pick and roll. He can be your ball handler and decision maker. Yeah, I mean, Wembanyama and Banchero, that would be a pretty scary lineup with Franz as like your third guy. You talk about all types of versatility, and then you could put in some crazy lineup where you have Wembanyama and Bol on the floor together. I mean, just I just think of so many creative lineups that you could have there, and it would be weird because whoever your point guard is, it's like you have to find the perfect point guard for that group, which is someone that is a facilitator that can knock down open shots. It's like they need more so of a facilitator / table setter defender than like guy that needs a lot of high usage. So if you had to choose between the guards that they have on the roster now to fit Wembanyama, who's the guy that you would absolutely keep?
Suggs.
Keep Suggs. All right, do you believe in Suggs as a shooter?
Somewhat. I don't think he has to be knocked down to be adequate. I think he can be adequate and he can improve, and he's the best defender of those guards that they have. And I'm, people say the it factor or like winning attributes. I watched Jalen Suggs in high school. I watched him at Gonzaga very closely. And he makes plays that help teams win. And he was able to do it even earlier this season in a few games on a bad team. When they've been in close games, he steps up in big moments. He defends the best guard on the opposing team, and he does a good job doing so. So I think he's the natural person to choose there because he's a adequate scorer, an improving shooter, and a very good guard defender.
Very valid. It makes a lot of sense there. I know he got off to a hot start at Gonzaga with the shooting, and his start was so hot that he was able to carry over throughout the season. Had somewhat of a decent shooting percentage from three, and then last year, I mean, he really struggled from three, 21%, and then I think he's at like 29% this year. So he'll definitely need to improve those percentages. But if you're a believer, then it makes a lot of sense. The free throw shooting is okay. 77 last year, 65 this year. I'm still not sold on him as a shooter.
I agree. I'm not sold on him as a shooter. I think he can become good enough with that lineup that he would be the natural player to fill in. And in this mock draft, if we're following, I've got Nick Smith or Osar Thompson at 6 and 7. So like you could take one of those guys and try going super even younger and have one of those guys be a table setter and defender. And Osar would be your pick. Nick Smith, if you want a dynamic guard. So, I mean, they're going to have a plethora of options and they're going to try some wonky lineups and they'll probably have to trade a few of their players and get even younger and trade for assets, but maybe they take a veteran point guard to play with those guys and have someone learn under the wings of a veteran a la Mike Conley. But, but I mean, I don't think he'd be they're necessarily the one they'd get, but that was just the first one that comes to my mind because I see it quite often.
On one hand, it makes a little sense because just without knowing their books off the top of my head, they have so many guys on rookie contracts that they probably could use like a larger contract. And to me, it does make some sense to have a veteran there to be like the one that balances everything out. I mean, I even look at Houston also as someone that could use a Mike Conley, and then you just kind of see his impact in Utah right now. As soon as he went down, they started sliding. So makes a lot of sense to me. All right, well, man, that wraps it up for this episode. Thank you, the listener, for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. This is available on Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. I am Rafael Barlowe, and he is Leif Thulin. He just gave you his mock draft 1.0. Stay tuned for the rest of the week where I will have Richard Stayman and Draft Dummies Sam Ferris share their mock draft 1.0 also. Once again, it's Rafael, Leif, and we are out.